welcome back.
Hello.
This is Bad Marriages in the Bible, and we are your hosts. I'm Sean.
I'm Kate.
And we are the founders of Dandelion Ministries, where we create space for you to experience and to know the grace of Jesus Christ in your place of need, where you actually need it. Because most of the time we're in denial of what that place is, and we're trying all our days and time and everything like that, trying to cope with the fact that we've got some place that's very needy and we don't want anybody to know about it, and we don't even want to face it most of the time either. So we fill our days with work and with, TV and, I don't know, social media, drinking, hard drugs, all these things. Hopefully not. But some of us do, and we need God's grace and mercy. Ooh, sorry, I just broke something in our studio. But we need his grace there. We need to be met in our actual place of pain. And so that's what we do at Dandelion. We do that with music, art, retreats, all sorts of creativity. You can check us out at our website, dandelionministries.org. This show is part of that. Bad Marriages in the Bible. We are, as we've said every episode, we are trying to find God's grace in our primary relationships. So even if you've never been married, or you were married, or all of that, whatever it may be,
contemplating it.
Yeah, you've had primary relationships with someone in your life, and that is probably one of the arenas in which you have experienced your sin and their sin. Your inability to love each other the way that you actually really need. And so that's why we talk about marriages. And we look at the Bible and we see so many people in their relationships and doing what we all do, which is trying really hard and failing each other a lot and needing forgiveness and grace and reconciliation.
Sean and I can't relate to any of what he just said personally. We've had the perfect marriage. So none of my antics have rubbed him the wrong way, or my deeply ingrained patterns, and vice versa. So, we're really offering these truths to you, poor people out there.
We're just trying to help all of you. That's right. I'm not tired or in a bad mood this morning because it's a Monday.
So we are speaking from personal experience and also getting a real kick out of the marriages that were in the Bible that have been written down and recorded carefully, word by word, for centuries. And they are telling the craziest stories about marriage. And these people are not trying to give you their best Instagram photo. They are giving you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it is so refreshing, sometimes like shocking. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not like that. But then they're like, yes, you probably are. You need this. But they were entrusted with a promise from God that his redemption is bigger. And even though they carried all sorts of cultural baggage and personal baggage, this promise was greater, that God redeems all things. And they carried it through their bad marriages, and it brought redemption in their marriages, and carried it along. So all the Bible was written down with this main thing, that Jesus Christ has come to forgive sins.
That's right.
And he's come after his main bride, which is you, the church.
Yes, he's come after us. Yes. And so we see it throughout the marriages, as Kate said, and also just through their family relationships, because we are all part of families. And so we also see and experience this there. And we need a God who's stronger than us and bigger. And that's what the Bible tells us we have. And so thank God for that. We are now in the middle of Song of Solomon, where we are celebrating marriage in a big way through this book. As we've been saying, it is a book of just really lifting up marriage and sex specifically, and just how wonderful these things are. And so we've been working our way through it. As we've said many times, this is attributed to Solomon, who was basically the main player. When you talk about being a player, he was the player of all time.
The Casanova of Casanovas.
Yeah, he had 1,000 women in his life, officially. I'm sure there were more. When you get to 1,000, it's like, what's a few more? And but anyhow, we're looking at his, essentially his marriage, one of his relationships. It's what's attributed to him. And so we have now finally reached the place where he is showing up in chapter 3 for the wedding. And as we've said, this is Hebrew poetry, and we're making our way to chapter 4, which is the actual wedding night. And we talked about how, from our point of view, you can read it chronologically from beginning to end, but there's also an argument for, which I think we like, for it kind of pointing forward to chapter 4, and then the second half pointing back to chapter 4, and really focusing in on the marriage. And
the consummation at the end of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so here now, we are watching the events unfold as this parade begins, and Solomon comes to the marriage, comes to the wedding to get his bride.
Yeah, he's probably, going to her house to fetch her and then bringing her back to his palace.
As one does.
Yeah, with his litter.
To go get your woman and bring her back.
Yeah. In fact, we were, many cultures do this. We were at the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. last spring, taking our kids there. And while we were there happens to be like a terrific event space on the penthouse of the Spy Museum, which they obviously rent out. And a very wealthy Indian family had rented it out for the wedding of their
child.
And we saw the wedding procession happen. It was a blocked off street, kind of not, on a side road on the side of the museum. And like the whole museum had to pause, and we all had to wait, which was a blessing because Sean was like desperately trying to find parking space. So we were waiting in the lobby. And so we had to watch this along with everybody. And there were probably 200 people in their fanciest outfits, the beautiful saris with sequins and
super colorful,
very colorful. There were trucks involved. There were sports cars involved. There were horses involved also, and a white stallion, and all of this was to celebrate. And there was very loud music and dancing, even the white people were asked to dance and they were in there. And it was wonderful and fun to watch. And so that was this beautiful procession that happened. And then it processed all of them still dancing, still with the loud music. The horses and the trucks and the sports cars didn't come in. They stayed outside. But everybody else danced in to the lobby, and we were all there with our new friends while they're like waiting for the elevators, which took a long time, to like take them up. Whatever, 6 at a time. So all of this like took quite a while. And then they went up into their event space, and all of it dissipated, and the Spy Museum continued to work. It was like just the most amazing thing. So when I think of Solomon's litter, I'm like, it's what I just saw, but times 10. A huge, just a huge crowd. It's they're coming back to Jerusalem after having fetched her. And there's this sort of broad generalization that his litter or his carriage is coming out of the wilderness. And so there's like an allusion to what Israel wandering in the wilderness and then coming into the promised land as God had promised them. So there's that allusion with that very broad, it's coming out of the wilderness, and with this big cloud of smoke, which is just, it's a unique word just describing that there's a lot of people. It's creating like
a lot of dust.
A dust cloud.
Yeah.
But then the first thing that they note is the aroma of the procession with frankincense and myrrh, which would make a Christian think immediately of Jesus and the burial,
or Christmas
with the gifts of the wise men given to him at his birth, or the burial spices on which he was wrapped at the end. So there certainly are those allusions there, that this is, God has his full story of redemption in view. And so for those who are reading this as like Jesus's love for his bride, that's certainly in there. And there is a lot of adoration for the bride. Like if you don't feel very special in general, read this,
right?
Because it shows how extravagant God's view, Jesus's view of the people in his church, the broken sinners that he's gathered to himself through his cross, through his death and resurrection, through that frankincense and myrrh spice, that he really highly values you and sees you as, and is like extravagant about his love for you. So there's certainly that reading in there. And then there's also the reading of the delight of a bride and groom, coming together, and they're celebrating, and God sort of rejoicing, and all the people rejoicing over them with the gift of marriage, where one man and one woman spend their lives together and work out all of the kinks of love and sin in that promise of each other, where God is in your midst and he's loving you and making you feel special. Yeah.
Well, I mean, all of that. And it's portraying this just big celebration, as you say, and just the idea of the sweet smelling perfumes and all that stuff continues with the theme of the winter's over and the spring has come, just this idea of just a lovely event, no body odor. It's like a lovely thing. And you're excited to be there, and it just smells great. It looks great. It's full of energy, like you said, like the wedding in DC. And it's a picture of really rejoicing. And then it moves to complete the picture with this whole idea of his litter, his carriage, with all of this security around it. Like there's like a ton of soldiers and mighty men, 60 mighty men around the litter and around the carriage, kind of guarding it. And so instead of thinking of like, guys with AK-47s or something, the idea is just that they're painting this picture. Again, the poetry is painting this picture of just deep security, that this is that Solomon is wanting to protect his bride and is overdoing it. Like you were saying before we were recording that this was like double what they would normally use.
Right. King David had 30 mighty men.
Right. And so Solomon's got twice that for his bride. And so it's painting this picture. Again, it's got both the natural and the typological there, where it's the natural is, this is just a groom going above and beyond for his bride, really just lavishing upon her and creating this incredible environment of joy, celebration, goodness, and safety. And then it's also very clear, I think, a clear allusion to how the Lord comes around us, that, we've got things like in scripture where our lives are hidden in Christ, that we're surrounded by him. He gathers us to himself under his wings, like a hen to her chicks, and just the images of God's protection and safety for us. I think that's all pregnant in this passage. And we're just seeing that is also pointing to it's picking up, I think, on what the bride has said a few times, oh, daughters of Jerusalem, like, don't awaken love until the time is right. I can't remember the exact language right now. It's Monday, but
close enough.
Yeah,
it was a great paraphrase.
That idea of something this intense and this important and this like big. I mean, this is like an explosion. What this scene is. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
just a, like boom, everybody's just letting it loose, and it's so exciting, and everything's been building to this, and it's, pointing backwards, pointing forwards, all of that. And it's just showing that this is the place where the full intensity of love lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In the context of marriage, where it's safe, where you can actually let loose and actually be as vulnerable, because that's the other side of all the security, is someone who needs the protection, right?
Absolutely.
A place of deep vulnerability. She's riding in a litter. Like, she doesn't have much. She can't do much. It's like riding on a couch.
In this box.
Yeah, like while people are carrying you down the street. So it's like there's the two sides of that, is like there's deep vulnerability, and yet this is the safe place for it. And it's okay here to actually be as needy and as open and as full of desire as you actually are.
And you see that too in the description of the litter. It's made with extravagant materials, the wood of Lebanon, the silver and gold and purple. I love how the Bible talks about purple as like a thing other than just like a color. Like, it's a tangible thing. Like, and she sold purple, know? And you're like, purple what? And they're like, obviously it's, I don't know, it's just the purple.
Dye.
The
purple
it was
stuff.
Like, oh yeah. Well,
it was like
it's just
very
dye.
Well, and it's a very expensive thing. It was a symbol of royalty as well, purple. And it was not cheap. When we think of this time of the world, there was a lot of beige and brown and and non-colors. You know what I mean? What you were describing in DC in the Indian wedding, like, that was only in the context of the most wealthy and lavish. Like the kings, Solomon was the one who was as
colorful.
Jesus says in Matthew 6, that he was adorned in these beautiful colors. Like, but the flowers surpassed him. All of that's one of my favorite passages. Yes. But only the kings and the wealthy had the ability to have a lot of color in their lives.
That's
basically,
right.
Like everybody else was in their beige.
That's right. We're in our browns, our
earth
tones, our earth tones literally covered in earth because of all the dust.
So anyway, purple has all that meaning with it too.
So, but then it finishes the description of the litter saying it was inlaid with love.
That's right.
That's what I'm talking about.
It sounds like Marvin Gaye or something, or Barry White. It's like, here we are.
And so that just reinforced that there's the place of, it is a vulnerable, helpless place. She's in that spot, but it's one where she's very loved in this picture. The other thing that strikes me as we sit on all of the protection and the mighty warriors, and just to reinforce what you were saying, like that this is, the book is coming to a climax in verse 7 of chapter 3. It says, "Behold, it is the litter of Solomon," with an exclamation point.
Yeah, right.
And for them, that's a big deal.
Look! That's what basically saying, like, look, there he is. That's what we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the grammar supports that. And then this is a wedding that is very celebrated, but it is with the terrors of night in view, which is what chapter or verse 8 ends with. So the mighty men are surrounding this litter, all of them wearing swords and expert in war, each with his sword at his thigh, against terror by night.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a couple that lives in this world, with all of the terrors that come at night. And I think of all the Disney princess movies that we have watched over the course of our parenting life and my own childhood. And they lived happily ever after. And that's how the movie ends. They lived happily ever after. But this story is beginning with the wedding and saying there are terrors that come by night, that, you're having your own insecurities within, your own sin within, but also difficulties without. And God has that in view with all of this armor. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's it, right? That's one of our mentors and professors used to say, it's the stuff that keeps you up at night. That's where you need grace. When we talk about your place of need, that's what we're talking about. What keeps you up at night? What are you afraid of? What can't you put down? Those things, those are the terrors by night. And sometimes they're very real external things, depending on where you were living on earth and what your context is. And oftentimes, at least here in the U.S., oftentimes there's a lot of existential aspects to it, of just the emotional and relational pain that we're carrying, and just needing that safety. I mean, that's the thing. When you hear this, it's all very fun to think about, just kind of the actual appearance of all of this, what this would have look like, the spectacle, as you were alluding to with the wedding in D.C. But then it also just thinking about your life and thinking about how desperate you are, as we open the show, and we always do, how desperate you are for a place to be this safe, for a place where you can actually be as vulnerable as you really are. I mean, we spend all our time trying to project something else and trying to cope with the fact that we've got this deep vulnerability, inside. And so often the world does not create that space for you. There's no space for it. I mean, when you think about it, we've got to be strong, and we've got to perform. We've got to be excellent at what we do. We got to achieve and excel and all these things. And very often the church reinforces those unhelpful messages, when what we're all really needing and desperate for is this space, somewhere where we can actually be known and seen and loved, which is what we're seeing here with Solomon. It's what this whole episode, where it is celebrating his arrival, immediately goes into his adoration of the bride. And that, I think, the typological here, I mean, this is where it gets really explicit in terms of sex, which we're not, as we've said, not saying that this is what the picture of what Jesus is. We're not talking about sex with Jesus, just to be clear, in case anybody's worried out there. But the thing I will say is that idea of being sought, Solomon going to get her and pouring out, just overdoing it in such an amazing way for her. And then just adoring her, just looking at her and just loving her in her vulnerability. I mean, this is it's what we're all desperate for. This is why, we've said before, this is why we make movies about it. It's why Jane Austen exists. I mean, this is what we need. And it is the cry of our hearts to actually be loved in this way. It's that's inner child of all of us, where our real pain began, where all our trauma is kind of located, is back in our early years, where we learned that the world isn't safe and that we have to put on an exterior and we have to try to protect ourselves because we're going to get hurt. That this is, to me, this is a picture of saying, the Lord saying, I know all of that. It's true in the best of marriage. Healthy marriages is where you actually can live in that place of vulnerability. It's scary, but it's also the safest place when it's a healthy place. But then what we're really...
Because there's a forgiveness.
Right, because there's actual grace.
You're able to name your wounds and talk about them together, and God helps you forgive each other, and you grow deeper and stronger in those places. So it's not because there's an absence of conflict. It's the forgiveness in the presence of conflict.
Right. But the grace is there. Yeah.
Super. A lot of grace. Yeah.
And all of that is pointing to what the Lord gives us, what you said, his promise to us, the fact that this is all in view of him bringing his people into the promised land, coming up out of the desert, out of the wilderness. And so, anyway, that's just what strikes me in this passage, that this is the thing that I so deeply long for as a person, just in general. And God is saying, I know, and this is why I've come. and this is what I give to you. I actually give you myself. I create this safe space for you. And the only thing you get there is not what, it's not how are you performing. It's not why aren't you getting stronger here, Sean? It's oh my gosh, I love you so much. And I'm just going to sit here and adore you. And just talk about how I think you're just the best.
It's so great. We all need to hear that.
Isn't that what you want to hear? And that is what this is pointing to. I mean, it is real in the natural, and but it does point us, just like everything in Scripture does. It points us to Jesus, and this is what Jesus does for us.
Absolutely. Amen to everything you've been saying. And I love that there is a word in here for both the man and the woman. That we both need that regard. We both need that truth and that way of being loved by Jesus, but also from each other. It's not just like mostly the guy's job to do that to the girl and for her to just receive it and be this like helpless little bride who needs to be rescued.
Which is where I was putting myself, for the record, all of you.
Right. And we both need that. And you can see that in this passage. Because Solomon has been chosen by his mother. It's right at the end in verse 11 by his mother and when he was crowned. And so it's not like Solomon was like, I'm going to become king one day and become the richest man in the whole history of Israel and, marry 1,000 people or like that was something that he was called into and brought into that God had ordained for him. And on this day he's being loved by having, it says on the day of his gladness of heart. So he's receiving this love as well as the bride who's sort of hidden in this passage, but she's in the middle of this litter, in the middle, inlaid with love. She's in there. And then, so both the bride and the groom need that kind of love from God, from Jesus for each other. And you could almost say that this beautiful, protected, stunning wedding is like, when God looks at us and sees Jesus and his righteousness on us. So you are beautiful and stunning and protected because it's Jesus on you. It's his, what the reformers would say, imputed righteousness.
Yeah.
It's a righteousness. It's Jesus's own beauty that's been put on you. And even though we're broken and sinners, he regards us as beautiful and spotless. And that kind of love begets love in us and makes us feel safe and gives us grace and mercy and forgiveness no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And it does, it says that in verse 11, look upon King Solomon. It's also like, come and adore him. Yeah, like you said.
Yeah.
Like, just look at him and check him out in a good way.
Exactly.
And yeah, all of that is so true. I know this is all in the context of marriage, but it always, whenever I read this, it makes me think of the safety of Jesus. We just read it this morning with our daughter, let the children come to me, all of that, the little kids moments when the disciples are trying to shoo them away, and Jesus is like, what? Stop. And just the safety that he is for them. And I think of that all the time because that's really where a lot of my, the stuff I've had to work on integrating and everything like that is back from when I was little. Yeah. And really just wanting to be safe, wanting to feel seen, wanting to be loved and held. And like you said, the Father looks at us and sees his Son. Our lives, we are, as I said earlier, we're hidden in him. And that Jesus is just this, he's like the greatest safe place ever. And so I love that. And he just adores us. Like I just think about, him doting on those kids and thinking about, in the best possible healthy way, a parent doting on their children, and just celebrating them. And
giving them something that makes them super glad. Yeah. Like Solomon's being given this bride here. It's like a total fun thing for him, you know.
Right. This is great. Yeah.
It's like the best bike ever for an adult.
That's right.
And likewise for her.
That's right. Yeah. And so it's a beautiful picture, and it is a great big celebration, and that's what they want you to see. And and as Kate said, it's for both of them. And we're going to see how in chapter 4, Solomon just begins to describe her from head to toe, and uses all this poetic language, and it sounds a little funny to our ears, I think, these days, but we'll see how it's a beautiful picture that he is painting of his bride.
Oh, yeah.
And she would have heard it like, this is the best, these are like some of the best lines you've ever dropped on me.
That's right. That's right. No, it's all in metaphor and in poetic language. So it's all very beautiful and rich in the symbolism. But one final thought, just to pull out all of it. So you see Solomon getting super blessed and loved, because he's also going to be protected by these 60 mighty men.
Right. They're there to protect him too. Yeah, that's true.
He's highly protected also. He's being delighted in, on the gladness of heart. But then there's also something special for Shulamite, the girl coming from the wilderness, his bride. And we've noted there's a little bit of tension with her from the country and the daughters of Jerusalem from the city. And so there's a sense where the city girls are invited, like, come out and look and see how special this girl is. She's being really celebrated, and she's really special. And so having the girls that she's dealing with some inferiority with, and Solomon is encouraging her and, really affirming her, often in light of that, being like, I know what they're saying, but this is how I see you. And so his affirmations will also be in light of that in chapter 4, which we'll get to next time.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. We did. And we, as always, have in our show notes the website, so you can check out our ministry. We also have a link for you to support the show, as all of what we do is supported by donations, and we would love to have you do that. You can review the show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, and we'd love for you to share it with your friends and neighbors and family and whoever. And there's also my email if you want to send us your questions and or prayer needs, and we will be praying for you. So you can check all that out in the show notes, and we will be with you again next week.
Thank you for your time. Have a good day.